too real and too scary. Some of the quotes that we heard people say, that they heard the gunshots, saw people laying on the ground, saying it was a truly horrifying experience. And those are the kinds of things that just stick with you for the rest of your life. You do not forget where you were. You do not forget what the situation was. You know, had you been at the grocery store that day, or you have a friend who lives in Boulder, are they okay? This is when, you know, we have people who step up and help one another. Those first responders, the fact that they were there, we heard from witnesses say that they were there quickly, and they went in and confronted someone with a gun, and that shots were exchanged. You know, there are so many hero stories that will also come out of this. But again, when we also learned that there were 6 lives lost, that's also the tragic part, when you know that they were Coloradans who were simply trying to go about their daily business. Let's get back to Gary Brode, who's also in Boulder this afternoon and has been talking with some folks about just what a sad day this is, Gary.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I mentioned earlier, people are coming out. I mean, over on the other side, we got a little closer up here, but beyond the police here, you could see more people outside, kind of just checking out, seeing what's going on. You know, as I get a little closer to this parking lot here, you can see SWAT team over here on the side, and really just a heavy police presence, as I mentioned just a few minutes ago. But kind of what sticks out to me is the fact that there's still a lot of cars in this parking lot, and I know that they're just cars, but at the same time, you know, there's people who drove those cars at some point today to get just to go grocery shopping, you know, and then things just took a complete turn, and it really kind of makes it just that much more real to see that there's just a lot of people that are, you know, either unaccounted for or just had to quickly just get up and leave. And so, you know, it's just kind of one of those situations right now where, yeah, we're just kind of waiting to figure out everything that happened, but it just looks more real. And again, I go back to the blown out windows over here. I mean, when you see that right in front of the King Soopers, I mean, it's a scary situation that we're looking at, and it's just harder and harder to kind of comprehend the more we walk around. We've basically done an entire loop around the King Soopers here just to kind of figure out what's going on, to talk to people, and the more we see and the more we talk to, it's a harder pill to swallow. So, you know, we're kind of just taking this minute by minute at this point, Ann.
Well, and Gary, we're hearing now that news conference will happen any minute. I know we've been saying this for a while now, but it will happen any minute, and we promise that we will bring that to you just as the very second we have wind that it's going to happen. So you can see the setup there. And just back to one other point that Jason had made earlier, President Biden has been briefed on the shooting here in Colorado, and he will be kept up to date by his team as there are additional developments. So we know that much as well. But again, you mentioned the cars out there in that parking lot, Gary. I mean, it's a crime scene, not just the store, but also the parking lot. And you're right. There are folks who, you know, who drove there today to do their shopping. Their cars are still there, and even those who were able to get out, they can't get back in to get their vehicles. I mean, they're already traumatized, and then this added frustration of they just can't get to their belongings. And
I mean, tough. Absolutely. If you really think about it, if I go into a grocery store at 2 o'clock to go get some bread and some milk, and then this happens at 2:30. I mean, you just don't think about these things until it actually happens, because honestly, we shouldn't have to think about things like this. But the truth is, yeah, again, when you see what the reality is right now, it's kind of hard to swallow at this point.
Particularly when you see that police presence. I mean, as we look at that live picture and even the pictures from earlier this afternoon, you know, I've heard from multiple people. Well, you said it yourself, Gary, you've never seen such a massive police presence. But it's also very telling about the techniques that officers are using now to be able to confront these. Go ahead.
And even I could tell you, we were on a story, we were on assignment just a few hours before this happened, or actually, now that I think about it, probably as it was happening. I'm heading south down from Thornton, and I see maybe 20, 25 officers going north, you know, going right by the opposite way. And it just shows you the presence of not just here in Boulder, but how many different law enforcement agencies knew that this was something that they had to jump in right away. And again, to see that, I mean, we're seeing different police departments, we're seeing different sheriff's departments. I believe I saw FBI. I mean, we are talking about, again, I've been working in the journalism field for nearly 10 years now. I have never seen even half of the amount of law enforcement that I'm seeing today, and it's kind of puts me in awe, because that just shows you the gravity of what's going on here today.
And I think it also speaks to the brotherhood and sisterhood of that job.
Yeah.
This is a job, and it's a heartbreaking job, and they have to do it. And they also have each other's backs. And this is when, this is when they need to stand up and be there for one another. And they have learned that technique has changed. Really, I guess really since Columbine, where they learned from that situation that they had to go in right away, but they also learned that they needed to be able to communicate with all of the other metro area police and fire and emergency departments, so that they were all on the same page about what was happening in these active shooter situations, so that everyone was fully briefed and there were no communication issues. So much has changed, and they have learned on how to respond to these situations. It doesn't make it any easier on any of these folks who have to deal with this, again, more than a couple of times in their lifetime, that no one should ever have to deal with, Gary.
Well, and that's just exactly it. I mean, I think you're spot on right there. I mean, yes, I shouldn't say it like this, but the truth is they've had practice. I mean, this has happened way too often. And we say this all the time when it happens like this, but that is why these law enforcement agencies know how important it is to be out here right now, because when you're talking about an active shooter like we were talking about just a couple of hours ago, things probably could have been even that much worse. I mean, if you don't have that heavy police presence and the training that we've now covered numerous stories on over the last few years, really, about how important this active shooter training has become, and to see, like you said, the brotherhood to really come together. And honestly, as I'm talking right now, the city of Arvada literally just pulled up here in Boulder. I mean, that's just. That prime example right there. That's not exactly a right down the road situation here. So yeah, I mean, again, this is just a case where it's happening too often, and now we know that, hey, we need as much help as possible in a situation like today.
Well, and sadly, it's become a part of our lives and our kids' lives. The fact that they do drills at school, in workplaces, wherever people gather. Yeah. Those drills now are just part of our lives. It really is a sad reality.
And of course, you bring up Columbine. I mean, you said your kids, and just we all grew up like that. And honestly, I think I was in maybe middle school, elementary school, high school. I can't really remember, but that's when Columbine happened. And really, it's that constant. I don't want to say fear, because I don't live in fear, but at the same time, you have to always be aware that now it can happen, and it's terrible to have to say that out loud. It really is, but that's just kind of, like you said, the reality we live in now. You're right, and I think you did raise a good point. We don't want to live in fear, and I think that is one of the great takeaways that a society can gain from an event like this, where we do not want to live in fear. We do have to be aware, and that is a very valid point. One quick note I'm seeing now from Boulder Police, that shelter in place at 17th and Grove, that has now been lifted. The shelter in place notice at 17th and Grove, that has now been lifted. And again, we are waiting on this news conference that will start any second now. I promise you it will be on all of our platforms. So don't get discouraged. It is going to happen as we wait to hear from Police Commander Kerry Yamaguchi and the Boulder DA Mike Doherty, and also a spokesperson from King Soopers, as we look at the area up in front of that Whole Foods where the microphones have been set up. Gary, talk a little bit more about some of the folks that you've been talking with this afternoon about, how they, first of all, I don't even know how you can have a conversation after dealing with a situation like that, you know? Yeah. Oh, and that's exactly right, because the truth is you try to have the conversation, but I mean, this just happened a couple of hours ago. I mean, this is still so fresh, and it's really hard to just kind of compute and process everything that just happened. I mean, even if, let's just say you lived right across the street from this, I mean, to know that a shooter was right across the street in what is normally a very nice neighborhood, in a very quiet neighborhood, and I know that sounds extremely cliche, but this doesn't happen, and it shouldn't happen. And the fact is that there are a lot of neighbors around here who are still trying to process this. And, Anne, I do want to, mention, I think as a journalist, yeah, of course, we have a thirst for knowledge and to want to know what happened. But, just as a human being, I want to know as much about what happened as just a person, as just a citizen, as just, someone who loves this community and the state. I want to know what happened and why, and I think we all do. And so I think, we're all waiting on bated breath for any information we can give. But at this point, of course, from our perspective, we can only really just react. But yeah, I mean, certainly, how could you not want to know everything that's going on right now? Because like you said, this is just not supposed to happen.
Well, and when we know that there are 6 lives lost, and we will learn their identities, I suspect, here fairly soon, and we will learn their personal stories, that they lived here, they were our neighbors, they were our, teammates, they were, whatever their personal story is, that hits home. That hits home for Colorado, and the fact that we've done this way too many times, that just hits our state really hard. So, again, we are waiting on that news conference. I promise we will bring it all to you, and we just are waiting, and we know that law enforcement. We've talked about this brotherhood, sisterhood. We know they are standing by one another as we wait and hope for the best. But sadly, this is not the outcome that anyone was hoping for this afternoon at just after 2:30, when we first were hearing reports of shots fired at a King Soopers store on what should have been a very quiet, easy afternoon at the grocery store, and one of those places that you should be easily able to shop and get your business done, where you know your neighbors, you go there on a regular basis. And I think it's really troubling for not just Boulder, but really the state of Colorado and really the nation, as so many people stop and wait and watch and wonder those same questions that you just raised, Gary, the why, and who would do such a thing.
And you said the nation. I mean, I 2 hours ago, on my way here, my brothers in Ohio told me about what was going on, and I had to tell them that I was on my way to come here. But yes, I mean, they're in Ohio, and they're already finding out about this, because of social media and things like that. Of course, things circulate a lot faster, but this shows, this has a long-lasting effect. I mean, when you're talking about at least 6 people, that is awful, and that is always going to resonate with anyone, because something like this, as I keep saying over and over, should not happen. And as I talked earlier, when I spoke to one of the King Soopers employees who was in there at the time, thankfully he got out, but he was just saying how I keep reliving it over and over. And I think Shannon said earlier that he, at one point, was involved in a similar situation, and it's hard to ever, I can't imagine, but from what I was told from that King Soopers employees is, he doesn't believe that he'll ever really be able to get that image out, or the sound of the gunshots. So, it's one of those things that's just going to have a long impact on a lot of people.
It just sticks with you forever. I mean, people don't forget. They just don't forget. And to your point earlier, this has made national news. All the networks are covering this. I mentioned earlier, I got a push alert from the Wall Street Journal. I mean, people are watching. The world is watching now, and this is not how Colorado wants to make news. We are known for our beautiful mountains, our beautiful scenery, our great air, our blue skies, and wonderful people, and this is not how Colorado wants to be remembered on a day like today.